All right, everyone, welcome back into another NFL prop betting video. We are going to be getting into the deep dive here for all the best bets for week 14. Let's go ahead and jump into it. So let's start off here with this first game, which is going to be Atlanta versus the Seahawks. Okay, so the Seahawks are going to be 6.5, about 7-point favorites in this game. I don't really have a take on that. I do feel like that's going to be correct there. Looking at the game total, 44.5 for the total points. So, a normal game, I would say, just in general. So what are we expecting, though, with this game? Probably a little bit more of a pass-heavy approach there from the Atlanta Falcons, maybe a little bit more of a run-heavy approach from the Seahawks. Now, personally, I didn't necessarily see any great bets in regard to the potential game script. There were two players that I could see getting onto for Atlanta. So one of those players would be Dylan Drummond, who is basically the receiver number 3 right now for the Atlanta Falcons. I don't necessarily love the role that he is in. He did have a bad drop in the last game as well, but Dylan Drummond, guys, is someone that did stand out in the preseason. And I will say this 1.5 receptions does to me seem to be a little bit of a decent bet if he's going to continue to get the snaps that he got, which was a 49% route share last week against the New York Jets. And so you would assume that they'd be playing from behind. So I don't mind that. He did also have a 44% route share. So this is actually a little bit of a bet where I think you could juice up it a little bit. I don't think we need to go crazy with it, but there is the potential for him to get, a big catch for, let's say, 20 plus yards, and then he adds on another catch. You could also make that same argument for David Sills, who played in 84% of the snaps, had an 89% route share, but only had 35 air yards, guys, only had 4 targets. So that's why his lines are pretty low as well. He does have a very good chance to get over 1.5 receptions, but the issue that we have with this Atlanta Falcons offense under Kirk Cousins is that it's really been basically a funneled target offense to Mooney, Bijan Robinson, and also this player here, Kyle Pitts, guys. So I will say, guys, Kyle Pitts for his 5.5 receptions for the over is not necessarily a great bet on PrizePicks or Underdog. But at the same time, it's not necessarily a terrible bet. About a 51% chance for the under to hit per Vegas. And that's why I say it's going to be more of a better traditional sportsbook bet. So obviously, PrizePicks and Underdog, we're always trying to game the game. Chase the bets have the highest likely to hit that correlate with how we see it. So Vegas is not agreeing with my assessment of this, but I do think he has a good chance to get over 5.5 receptions given the game script that we have here. But it also would feel like a bet that we are forcing a little bit. Now I want to go ahead and get into the Seahawks. I actually think with the Seahawks, we are going to get some better bets just in general, guys, mostly because the Atlanta Falcons have been giving up a lot of production over the past 4 weeks. They're one of the few defenses that have gotten drastically worse recently, basically the only one that you could see a noticeable difference from their season-long stats to the last 4. Basically, every other defense, it kind of tells the same story. So I'm looking at this, I see the game spread, and I know it will probably be more of a run-heavy approach in the second half. That being said, I think Sam Darnold has a great chance to get over 227.5 for his passing yards. We are seeing differing lines out there, guys. The average sportsbook line has us at 231.5, which might end up being a little bit too low as well. The projection data does not like the over. The reason why I like this is because of the last 4 games for the Falcons, where they've given up an average of 279.5 passing yards to opposing quarterbacks. On top of that, the Seahawks are coming in off of a bad game passing the football against the Minnesota Vikings. That being said, they didn't really have to do all too much because the Vikings were just terrible with their undrafted quarterback in Max Brosmer. The issue that I have with Darnold is I think I actually like getting to Cooper Kupp a little bit more, especially when we're seeing some of his prop line differences here for his yards. 3 yards lower on PrizePicks at 29.5. I do like that, but I also do like the idea of Cooper Kupp to get over 2.5 receptions in this matchup as well. The Falcons, I mentioned that they've given up a lot of passing yards. That's the second most that they've given up over the last 4 weeks compared to any other team. They've also given up the second most receptions to opposing receivers as well, about 4.5 on average. Now, obviously, we like JSN a little bit more, but Cooper Kupp, guys, playing a lot of snaps, had an 87% route share last week, and I just think the targets will be there for him. The Falcons, maybe they're not the Vikings under Brosmer or the Titans. Like, they should be a little bit of an improvement from those last 2 matchups, and so with that, I do expect them to at least have to get the football to Cooper Kupp. I'm expecting about 4 targets. Hopefully, you convert 3 of those into receptions. And then I actually really like the bets that we're getting for JSN, then especially if you are not liking the 2 bets I just called out for Cooper Kupp and or Sam Darnold. So JSN did have a bad week last week against the Vikings. I kind of expected that. I do expect him to have a bounce back game here again against the Falcons, who have struggled recently. 6.5 receptions seems too low, but also his yards seem too low as well. He's obviously been crushing this. So either one of these 2 bets I think are 2 pretty stellar bets that we can get to for JSN. And if we look at the data, guys, the data is favoring the over for that 92.5 receiving yards, about a 51% chance to hit. So if you guys are someone that exclusively bets on PrizePicks or Underdog, not a terrible bet for you guys to get into there. So let's go ahead and get into those Minnesota Vikings that I just talked about. They are going to get J.J. McCarthy back, which is apparently going to actually be a massive upgrade from Max Brosmer. Okay, this is a game that is projected to stay close against the Washington Commanders, who have obviously struggled. Now, what's interesting about this game, I would say, is that spread with the Vikings only being 1.5 point dogs, with the Washington Commanders getting back Jaden Daniels. Now, that being said, I mentioned this a bunch now. Marcus Mariota has been playing pretty well at the quarterback position, and so maybe they're kind of seeing that there isn't going to be a massive difference, especially Daniels coming in off of an injury in which he hadn't necessarily looked all that great prior to it, especially compared to his previous season. So I think that might be why, but I do think there could be an opportunity to bet on the Commanders here in some capacity. Maybe if J.J. McCarthy actually ends up playing a little bit better, this could actually end up being a little bit of a shootout as well, assuming that Daniels plays better. So I could see myself getting to the total for the over because, well, let's just face it, guys. It's a great matchup for the Minnesota Vikings. It's kind of a get-right spot for the Vikings. And if J.J. McCarthy does struggle in this game, that is just brutal. I like the idea of getting to J.J. McCarthy for getting to Jordan Addison for over 3.5 receptions. We seem to be heavily involved in the offense. Just the plays haven't necessarily been there for him. Last week, guys, he ended up getting 90% of the snaps as he has been, but he ended up getting 10 targets, had 98 air yards. Now, that was a different quarterback, don't get me wrong, but this is how you attack the defense. And so this line definitely seems too low for me. I do like Jordan Addison as a juiced up bet to get over 3.5 receptions. Now, if you didn't want to get to that, you could just do his over 39.5 receiving yards as well. But like if he's getting this, I think there's a good chance that he gets over 3.5 receptions. So I do think it's worth the increased rest to do that 3.5 receptions there. I did want to get to Justin Jefferson as well. And again, if we are kind of just betting on J.J. McCarthy to indeed have a better game in this game, because let's face it, Seahawks game, that was just a wash with Brosmer. Packers, very tough defense. Chicago probably should have done better at. Baltimore probably should have done better at. And Detroit probably should have done better. I get all that. It just seems like a good right spot. So I don't mind the idea of getting to Jefferson for over his overs as well. He's just due. He's simply put due. And if you guys are someone that does specifically bet on PrizePicks, they do have it at 5. I think there's a good chance he does get to 5. Now, whether or not he gets the over, we'll see. All the other data points are pretty much telling us it should be at 5.5. So worth calling that out there. And then on the flip side of this game, I don't necessarily like any bet for the Washington Commanders all too much. So one of my favorite bets is actually Chris Rodriguez to get over 10.5 rush attempts. Okay, so we are going to notice this one has about a 51.8% chance to hit. The reason why we might hesitate to get to this bet is 2 reasons. The offense changes with Daniels being the quarterback. That could happen. Or maybe JCM actually gets going a little bit. I don't necessarily see them taking the work away from Chris Rodriguez. Maybe Jeremy McNichols, who has been impressive, gets a little bit more work as well. I guess that's another factor as well. But based on what we have seen, it does seem like Chris Rodriguez is going to be able to get over 10.5 rush attempts. So Chris Rodriguez, guys, over the past 4 games has gotten the over 3 times now. Okay, he had 44% of the snaps last week, guys, ended up with 11 rush attempts in a game where it was tough to rush the football against the Denver Broncos, although he did well. He had 41 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown. It's kind of the same script here. And given the fact that it's a game that isn't projected to be a blowout, I think that should mean it's more of a Chris Rodriguez game, assuming that, again, he does outsnap JCM once again. And why is it important that he has gotten the over in 3 out of the last 4 weeks? Well, that's really when he started to take over that big workload that we have seen him get. So since week 9, 34, 35, 45, and 42% of the snaps, the leading snap getter now over the past 2 weeks, in which we have seen JCM really dip off now. And so Rodriguez has started. Seems like he's going to start again. And so this does end up being a pretty intriguing bet to me, again, assuming the game stays close. All right, so now we go ahead and get into the Tampa Bay Buccaneers versus the Saints here. 8.5 point spread in favor of the Bucs, which I find interesting. I do think if that ends up happening, we should be looking at some of the overs for Bucky Irving, just assuming that he gets more snaps. And the Bucs have gotten a little bit healthier. I understand that. Saints could potentially be without Chris Olave as well. That's a part of it. But the Saints have looked better recently. And so if everything's equal, news-wise, meaning Chris Olave plays, there's no surprising inactives, I would say that the Saints should be able to cover that, but kind of an interesting bet there. On top of that, guys, it is worth calling out that there is some rain in the forecast, which could potentially impact this game. Maybe that's why we're seeing a lower point total, and maybe that's why we are seeing the Saints be massive dogs, because last week Devin Neal had to get 80% of the snaps. Devin Neal is going to be a rookie running back for the Saints. So I think that's potentially why. And so it's, that's how I'm reading this. And because of that, it does put a little asterisk, I guess, on some of the bets I'm going to present to you guys, because it could impact these bets greatly. So as I mentioned, I do like Bucky Irving to end up having a good game, especially just because maybe it's a game that he needs to rush the football more in. We are seeing some prop line differences for him, guys. I do like his over 66.5 rush yards on Underdog. Okay, so if you guys are some of the bets there, bet that. The PrizePicks line is a little bit too high, so shop around, guys, if you guys are some of the bets elsewhere. And let's just actually take a peek here, guys. We'll zoom out. A lot of them have him at 67 rush yards, 66. So just shop around, make sure that you're doing that. Most of the books are basically 67. I'd be okay with that over. But for me, if I'm betting on Bucky Irving, I might just do his over 14 for his fantasy score. So last week, guys, he did end up playing about 54% of the snaps. I kind of expect that to go up to at least 60%, maybe 54%. He ended up getting all the opportunities that we would want. He ended up getting 19 opportunities in that game. And so you assume a slightly better matchup, a game that probably is going to dictate more of a run-heavy approach. And I think he just has a better chance to score a touchdown. Now, you could simply bet on him to score a touchdown. I get that, but he's going to add some production receiving the football. And so I think he could still get the over 14 fantasy score without scoring a touchdown. And so that's why I'm not betting him to score an anytime touchdown. Now, guys, we are getting plenty of other decent bets, I think, in this game. Chris Godwin for over 3.5 receptions is a pretty appealing prop bet to me. He ended up playing it in 63% of the snaps last week. That's a number that could actually go up this week. He is seemingly healthy. Did drop a touchdown in that game, but it is a pretty solid matchup for him. So I don't mind betting on him to continue to kind of see himself just play healthier pretty much. Another player that I'm actually confused by the lines with is Devon Valet. Devon Valet is someone that I like the idea of juicing his lines as well, whether it be 3.5, 4.5 receptions, or even more than that, or his receiving yards as well. You could do that. Okay, his lines are just too low given the game. Now, again, maybe it's due to the weather. I like the idea of him to get over 2.5 receptions. If you just want to make it a simple bet, you can. He has been the receiver number 2 in this offense now for the past 2 weeks, guys. Last week, playing in 88% of the snaps, 88% of the routes, had 8 targets, 8 receptions, 93 yards, and a receiving touchdown, as well as nearly a 2-point conversion. He was kind of the difference maker in that game. He ended up getting a recovery of a 2-point conversion as well. It seemed like a re-breakout game for him because obviously he was the receiver number 2 last year for the Denver Broncos for most of the year. So it is nice to see him playing well. He looked good as well. That's part of it. But it's the snaps in a game that they are projected to be dogs. And again, the rain is a concern. Hopefully that doesn't impact this bet, but also I do like the other bet that I'm going to give you guys as well. Just want to show you guys the lines that we're getting for Valet. Basically a 50-50 split for some of those, but I do like Mason Tipton as well. His reception line for me, guys, at 2, I think is a good over bet, or his potentially over receiving yards. He is someone that, again, given the potential game script that we're going to see, is very intriguing. Chris Olave is currently questionable as well. We did see a lot of 11 personnel out of the Saints last week, to the point where not only did Valet play a lot of snaps, but Mason Tipton ended up playing in over 80% of the snaps as well. Okay, he ended up with 4 targets, 3 receptions for 20 receiving yards. And so I see his line at 2 receptions, and I'm like, Shaw's been improving. Good matchup for Shaw. Tipton should be able to get to at least 2 receptions. So it could end up being a push, don't get me wrong, but at 2 receptions, I think that ends up being a pretty good spot for us as well. And then one other Saints player, guys, and again, with the rain, we probably don't want to get this much exposure to them, but it'd be like looking at Juwan Johnson to continue to play well. He's playing in over 70% of the snaps, had a 79% route share, 9 targets last week, and I think he also has a good chance of being a push at 4 receptions. And we look at his game log as well, worth calling out, like pretty productive there as well. And then we go ahead and get into a game where I don't actually like a lot of the bets that we're getting prop bet wise. There is one that I called out early on in the week. That was Chase Brown to get over 51.5 rush yards. I still like that bet, assuming that he gets 60% of the work. But looking at the spread, guys, it is a 6-point spread in favor of the Buffalo Bills, and it is a very high game total. Now, this is a game that could potentially get rain or snow weather-wise. Okay, so there's the weather itself is projected to be about 32 degrees. And so that kind of impacts whether it could snow or rain, which could really impact whether or not the weather changes the dynamic of the game. Obviously, both of these offenses are great, but maybe the weather plays a factor, and to the point where this under ends up being kind of the easy bet, where teams just the two teams aren't able to get going on offense. But Vegas is expecting that to not be the case. And so I still do end up liking Chase Brown over 51.5 rush yards. And then a weird plus EV bet that we have, guys, is actually T. Higgins to get under 4.5 receptions on Underdog. And so don't place that bet there. Well, sorry. You can bet him under 4.5 receptions. I actually like the over bet more. If the game is correct, obviously you get Joe Burrow back, and that's huge for the offense. Jamar Chase is going to get his targets. P. Ryan and Chase Brown might get their targets out of the backfield as well. But T. Higgins in a high-scoring game where they're projected to play from behind, I do think that ends up being a solid bet, assuming he's not banged up. Again, that's a juiced-up bet that I think we can get to. And then a game that I'm just not trying to bet on is going to be the Steelers versus the Ravens. Tough to say if Rodgers is going to be healthier. That obviously impacts a lot of this game. The Ravens haven't really looked all that good. I think both the prop betting lines and the odds that we're getting are correct. So we're going to skip over that game and then get into another game here, guys, that I don't necessarily love all too much. We have one bet that I'll call out. That's going to be the Jaguars versus the Colts. So Daniel Jones looked fine for someone that has a broken leg or a broken bone in his leg, I should say, last week. Ended up making some good plays ultimately. Would be a good matchup. I would love to target his overs. I don't want to do that because he is a little bit banged up. If he was healthy, I would say we should be smashing the over points here. And if you think he is, if you guys watched that and thought, no, he's good enough, sure, bet that over points. Spread-wise, the Colts have played well. They might have lost some games recently, but they're playing well. I know the Jaguars have been able to win some of these games, but I'll talk about a game later. This is basically the same game to me as like the Bears-Packers, where if all things are equal, I think the Colts should be able to win this game by a decent amount, even though the Jaguars have been able to find ways to win games that maybe they shouldn't. But again, that's just a bet on Jones being healthy. So for props bets, I don't necessarily want to get to any of those bets for the game or spread or money line for that matter. Money line, probably the best route to go if you like the Colts. Bet the Colts, minus 129 if you like the Jags, plus 105 on average. So one of my favorite bets on the week, guys, is going to be Jacoby Myers to get over 4.5 receptions. Okay, so especially if you're betting on PrizePicks or Underdog, this bet has a 52.8% chance. We'll just call it 53% chance to hit. Now, the average sports line and the projection data are all in agreement that he's going to get 4.5 receptions. And a partial upgrade for this bet would be if Parker Washington were to end up sitting, who has kind of been the receiver number one for the Jaguars simply because he's been healthy this whole year. And he's looked pretty good doing it. But Jacoby Myers, guys, has seen 6 targets in every game thus far for the Jaguars. Ended up playing in 90% of the snaps last week. And he gets a very good matchup against the Colts, who give up the 4th most receptions to opposing receivers as well. Okay, so that's all very appealing there for me with Jacoby Myers. And then we go ahead and get to the Jets versus the Dolphins. I kind of like that this game is a little bit of a toss-up, 41.3 total points, a 3-point spread in favor of the Dolphins winning, which I would agree with. But I will say I kind of like a little bit of a game stack here for some of the overs for some of the pass catchers. So the first player that I like betting on in this game is going to be Darren Waller to get over 32.5 receiving yards. He got the over last week in his first game back from returning from the IR. He ended up playing a decent amount of snaps overall, but I really like the fact that he played in 63% of the routes. Maybe that number goes up. I will say the broadcast crew was hyping up Greg Dulcich a little bit more than I'm comfortable. Okay, I was actually hoping that there'd be more hype of Darren Waller, and there's just a strange amount of Greg Dulcich hype. Now, Darren Waller still outsnapped him, but Greg Dulcich still played in 36% of the snaps and still had 2 targets for 2 receptions and 24 yards. That being said, Darren Waller had 48 air yards, 3 targets, 2 receptions, and 47 receiving yards. Hopefully that number goes up, and I don't mind it. Again, this is a pretty solid bet for the game. And then for the Jets, I can almost guarantee that you guys know what I'm going to say with the Jets receivers already, because I've done it now for like 3 straight weeks. I like the idea of juicing up either John Mechie or AD Mitchell. This has been something that's worked for us so far for them. Okay, so Mechie ended up having 65 receiving yards 2 weeks ago, only 19 last week, but he's playing 90% of the snaps, and I really like the idea of getting him to over 3.5 receptions. At 4, I would say that's basically correct. Probably has a chance to be a push. But once again, last week, we saw Mechie get 8 targets, guys, 46 air yards, 4 receptions, and 19 receiving yards. Don't love the 19 receiving yards, but overall, love the snaps and the targets. And then we go ahead and take a peek at AD Mitchell. So Mitchell is someone that I feel like I've hyped up properly. I thought I set some pretty good expectations for him. And then he goes off for 102 receiving yards, a touchdown, 8 receptions, and 12 targets, seemingly looking like a stud in that game. Had 182 receiving yards, guys. And so I mentioned last week that it's not a bad thing that a player is getting open and still getting a lot of targets and playing a lot. Like, you're eventually going to catch the balls if you're an NFL receiver, and he ended up doing that. He kind of actually reminds me a little bit of George Pickens, where it's like, yeah, we see the film. The film's great when it's great, and you might have a few moments where it's like, oh, goodness. But overall, you like it. And so Mitchell, I really love the idea of teasing. All these bets are bets where the over is the favorite, so I'm kind of just displaying that for you guys if you want to get to it. But 182 air yards. He played in 90. He had a 97% route share. And so if we're going to like juice up Mitchell, I think it would be over 4.5 receptions. But both of those two, with Tyrod Taylor still being the quarterback, are very much appealing to me there. So really, I think we have a little bit of a game stack. Hopefully it ends up being a little bit more of a shootout than really what Vegas is expecting. Then let's go ahead and get into Denver versus the Raiders. Another game that has the potential to be a blowout. 7.5 point spread. Very low over and under. Okay, and I think that's mostly due to the Broncos offense not necessarily lighting it up. Raiders defense being pretty darn solid as well. Raiders defense actually did pretty well against the Broncos last time they met. So for what that's worth, you guys will have to decide that. But I do like getting to Courtland Sutton for over 3.5 receptions. Still their receiver number one. We actually saw Pat Bryant out-snap Troy Franklin. So that's kind of what I expected coming in off of the bye week, is that Courtland Sutton would retake that receiver number one role. Had 5 receptions in that game, guys. I think he has a good chance to get over 3.5 receptions. I don't hate the idea of getting to him for over 47.5 receiving yards as well. The issue is in the last game, he was the one that struggled against the Raiders. So Troy Franklin was the one that had a pretty decent game. And then a pretty interesting bet as well, given the fact that the Broncos are going to be pretty heavy favorites in this game. RJ Harvey to score an anytime touchdown. It is interesting. So 53.7% chance for this to hit. The issue with Harvey is we don't really expect him to get like 60% of the snaps, maybe not even 50%. Like last week, he ended up playing him 44% of the snaps. Now he ended up getting a decent amount of work, enough work for us to, I would say, feel comfortable betting on him to score a touchdown in this game. It's not a lock and load bet is kind of my point there. But still, the fact that it is 53.7% chance on PrizePicks and Underdog, that feels like a pretty darn good bet overall. And then one player that I'm just annoyed by the lines with, they're pretty sharp, I would say, is with Jack Bash, where Deontay Thornton is out with a concussion. We actually saw Bash play in had a 64% route share. Nope, that's wrong. He played in 64% of the snaps with Deontay Thornton out last week. So I thought we were going to get some good lines on him. I don't necessarily hate this over fantasy score of 4.5, but it's also not a bet that I need to target. All right, guys, so we do have 2 more games left, but I do just want to call it the 9to5sports.com website, which is how I do all my research for all the bets that I give you guys. We have fantasy golf tools, NFL tools, basketball tools for props betting, and NFL DFS. If you guys want access to any of the tools that you saw throughout this video, head on over to 9to5sports.com. You guys can get access to all the tools for a low monthly cost of $10 a month. And then also, guys, if you could just like the video and subscribe to the channel, that does help out the channel a bunch. If there's a bet that you guys like, feel free to leave a comment on the channel, just pretty much saying, hey, I agree with your bet. Or if you disagree, let us know why you disagree in a nice full way. You know, the whole point of giving out prop betting content is to help each other. That's why I do it. And so, guys, feel free to leave comments in there as well. Let's go ahead and finish up the video, and then I'll give you guys my 6 favorite bets for the whole day. All right, so we go ahead and get into the Green Bay Packers versus the Chicago Bears. Now, one thing the Packers have been terrible at is the spread, covering the spread this year for the most part, or just drastically outproducing the spread. They are 6.5 point favorites in this game against the Bears, which seems kind of strange, I will say. And it is a normal game, 44.6 total points. I'm wondering if Rome Odunze being out in this game is the reason why that is. And also the Packers are getting back Rashawn Gary in this game. I would say those are 2 big factors for sure. I'm just really surprised at the point spread of 6.5 total points. So if you want to bet the Bears to cover, you can get them at like minus 105. I really don't hate that idea. I think that's a decent bet just for them to cover at 6.5 points. It's just strange. I do think the Packers should be the favorites, don't get me wrong, but I do think it has a chance to end up being a closer game than really what Vegas is expecting. Now, I think the reason why we are seeing that is due to the weather. It's expected to be a pretty cold game, like 18 degrees, which if it dips below that, if it starts to get to 10 degrees, that starts to feel really cold. 18 isn't necessarily too bad, assuming it doesn't rain or snow. does hurt when you fall on the ground, but it's manageable. But if we are going to see a more run-heavy approach from both teams, I actually do like the idea of Kaminaga to get over 11.5 rush attempts. And the reason why we would expect that is because it being colder, it's a little bit harder to throw and catch the football. It's just harder for receivers to catch the football. And so it does tend to lead to a more run-heavy approach, which is, I think, why the game total isn't all that high. I think if you doubled the weather, the degrees of the weather, like to 36, even 40, it'd be like 4 more points for the total because both offenses are obviously pretty darn good. But yeah, Kaminaga to get over 11.5 rush attempts. I do like this bet. He is basically in a 50-50 split with DeAndre Swift, playing 45% of the snaps last week. He is more of a between the tackles type of rusher, more of a bruiser. And so I do think he is someone that would benefit with the cold weather. Went to Rutgers as well, guys, so kind of used to playing this. I mean, DeAndre Swift should be used to playing in cold weather at this point of his career as well. So not necessarily a minus against Swift, but more of a call out for Kaminaga there. And if we do look at his recent game log, he has been basically consistently getting to that over in 4 out of the past 5 games. So obviously we do like that there for him. And then I had to get into just the receptions that we are getting for all the receivers in this game pretty much. Like Christian Watson get over 3.5 receptions. Again, it's like hoping that the coldness of the game doesn't change all too much. Like this would be a great bet if we weren't worried about the weather. Playing 70% of the snaps, had 10 targets last week, the clear receiver number 1 right now. Like that'd feel like an easy bet. You also have Romeo Doubs that you could bet to get over 3.5 receptions. A very strange line for him. Looking at the Chicago Bears guys, DJ Moore to get over 3.5 or 4.5 receptions with Roma Dunze out. You would expect him to be the clear-cut top pass catcher. And if they are going to be 6.5 point dogs, then like DJ Moore should be able to get going. Zacchaeus is someone that we would expect to play much more with Roma Dunze out, about 50% of the snaps at least. He is someone that was out snapping Luther Burden for most of the season, although recently Burden's been out snapping Zacchaeus. Either way, in 3 receiver sets, both of them are going to end up playing, which brings me into Luther Burden. I really like him to get over 2.5 receptions. If he gets a little bit of an increase in his targets as well with Roma Dunze out, I would like him to get over 3.5 receptions. So I did want to call it all those bets. They all just seem a little bit too low. But again, I do think it's because of the weather. So a little bit risky, but if you just want to blindly stack on this game being a shootout, you could just bet on a lot of those over receptions. And then one other bet that I wouldn't mind, it's basically a bet on the weather not impacting it too much, would be Jordan Love to get over 215.5 pass yards. The PrizePicks line that we see here is the lowest out there. Average sportsbook line closer to about 217, as well as Underdog. Projection data really likes the over here, which again, I'm assuming that that would be the standard projection if it weren't for how cold this game projects to be. So might be looking into that a little bit too much. We'll admit that, but definitely an interesting game to spend some time on, as I just did. Which is also going to be the case for the last game that we're going to mention here, guys, the Cardinals versus the Rams. And so the Cardinals are going to be without Marvin Harrison Jr., but also Greg Dortch and potentially Xavier Wheeler. So 3 out of their top 5 receivers, they are going to be without potentially. Actually, 4 out of their top 5 receivers potentially, unless you include Trey McBride, who basically is. I do think that's going to present a pretty good opportunity for us, but that is why we are seeing them be 8.7 point dogs in this game. It is a pretty high scoring game, so there is a little bit of a stacking opportunity in this game for props betting purposes. It is very interesting, I would say, the point total, because like you take away another pass catcher for Jacoby Brissett, even though he's looked good, to me this screams like more of a run heavy approach for the Rams. And so for me, I actually don't mind the idea of getting to like Kyren Williams for over 14.5 rush attempts, or his anytime touchdown, or his fantasy score. Now all the data is kind of telling us to bet the unders. Don't necessarily like that. And the reason for that is because Blake Corum has been taking some work away from him. That has been a thing that's been happening for sure. And Blake Corum has definitely looked good as well. There's no taking that away from Blake Corum. But the snap difference has stayed the same, guys. Like Kyren is still playing 67% of the snaps. And I know Corum scored a rushing touchdown, but all in all, I think for the most part, it's going to end up being Kyren. If you don't like this bet, go with Blake Corum to score a rushing touchdown. Again, they're almost 9-point favorites in this game. That typically leads to at least a rushing touchdown. And so I'm very shocked at the lines that we are getting for both of those two. The fact that those are demon bets on PrizePicks to me is very shocking. And then, yes, guys, I do like Michael Wilson in this game here as well. So in the 2 games without Marvin Harrison Jr., we saw him get 15 targets and 18 targets. 10 receptions, 15 receptions, over 100 receiving yards in both. I mean, he had over 300 receiving yards in those games. I mean, insane production for him. And then last week, guys, didn't necessarily fall off too much. 7 targets still played the same amount of snaps that we'd want. And so it's been now 4 straight games of 7 targets. So we already like that. And with them being still banged up at the running back position, like you would just expect Michael Wilson to be peppered with targets. And so I really like the idea of betting on him to get over 5.5 receptions. You could even bump this up a little bit. Okay. There's a good chance that he gets peppered with targets, which I looked on Underdog. They have his line for his targets at 7.5, which I would say is basically correct. I like that bet. And I also would like Xavier Weaver as well. If he's going to be active, he is questionable. His lines would just simply be too low. Okay, we have seen Greg Dortch be involved in the offense a little bit. The targets have been there for Xavier Weaver. He had a catch on the sidelines that just missed a couple of games ago as well. So if he's active, you could bet on him to score a touchdown, get over 1.5 receptions. If he does that, I do like him to get to over 14.5 receiving yards, because when we look at like Jacoby Brissett, guys, we're still getting him at 255.5 pass yards. Now, that's not all going to go to Trey McBride, although as someone that heavily drafted him in best ball drafts and has him in a fantasy football league, I would love that. That'd be great. But like the yards have to go somewhere. And so like Xavier Weaver, like assuming he's healthy, should be able to have a good game. And then one other bet, like I actually think this is one of the better sneaky good bets on the week, is because they're so banged up, and especially if Xavier Weaver does end up sitting, Elijah Higgins would probably end up getting a decent amount of work here in this game, guys. So he ended up playing in 41% of the snaps total last week. You could see that number go up to maybe 50, even 60. The Bears run a lot of 2 tight end sets. Steelers obviously do a lot of that as well. I think they've just be forced into that. And so I think him to get over 1.5 reception or his receiving yards ends up being a pretty sharp potential bet there. And for what it's worth, I also don't mind Colby Parkinson to get over 2.5 receptions. All right, so going ahead and getting to the bet of the day here for, just going to show you guys it on Underdog. Just easier for me. A lot of reception bets. I apologize for that. That's just like my brain tends to like those ones the most. Don't necessarily need to recap these. I did just mention I like Colby Parkinson. Probably should spend a little bit of time on that. Basically, it's a bet on him still seeing 60+% of the snaps and getting at least 4 targets. That's really the bet there for him. And in a game that could be a higher scoring game. So I do like that. And then just a lot of solid bets here. For PrizePicks, I do like Bucky Irvin to get over 14 for his fantasy score. So I did cover a bunch here, guys. There are going to be a lot of fantasy score prop bets that are popping up as some of the best bets as well for the 9to5sports.com PrizePicks and Underdog optimizers. Nothing too crazy like last week. Like last week, we had some massive prop line differences for the quarterbacks. Don't necessarily have that this week. It seems like they corrected that. Maybe they will, but as I'm recording this, not necessarily the case. That's going to do it, though, for this video, guys. Appreciate you being here. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel. If you guys would like access to any of the tools that you saw throughout this video, make sure to head on over to 9to5sports.com. Get access to all those tools for a low monthly cost of $10 a month. Thanks for watching. Good luck, and as always, let's keep cashing.